Welcome back to Notes from School, the podcast. This is a very special edition because I am on the other side of the pond today. So we're actually having a transatlantic school assembly. And in this strange assembly hall that is somewhere in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, we are welcoming in Anthony Garone. Welcome into the school assembly hall.
Thank you so much, James.
This is going to be a kind of an interesting experience because normally in the podcast, I talk a lot about British memories and nostalgia and the school assembly songs, but I'm going to kind of ask you a little bit about what you do, your YouTube channel, Make Weird Music, which if you're watching this on YouTube, we've got a beautiful sign behind us, and kind of your journey in business and music and how that all kind of interlinks, but also maybe even ask your opinion on an outside perspective of the slightly strange British experience of the school assembly. So anyway, without further ado, let's introduce Anthony Garone to all of the people waiting in this interesting assembly hall that's between America and the UK. So you've got an amazing YouTube channel called Make Weird Music, but you also have written a number of books, one of which in particular was quite inspiring to me in my kind of journey. And first of all, could you just talk to me a little bit about what Make Weird Music's all about? You set it up about 10, 11 years ago now, is that right?
Yeah, it was Pi Day, March 14th.
Oh, nice.
2014. It was a night of despair.
Okay.
You know, as an artist, sometimes you feel like nobody cares about anything that you do. And so I was going to erase all of my music and get everything just offline, just shut it all down. And realized, okay, that's probably a little too extreme. So I ended up buying, it was like literally 11:30 p.m. I'm just like, what am I going to do? Yeah. So I thought, I like making weird music. So makeweirdmusic.com. I bought it, you know, the typical, I bought a domain, I got an idea, and it's going to save me for the rest of my life. It ended up, you know, I started as a really small project. And after so many zeros week after week after week in my music career. Right. Yeah, like you post a song, and this is early, you know, like you post a song, nobody's listening. There's no streaming services. So you put it on your website, you put it on iTunes, and nobody's buying. So it was just zero every week, and I just thought, who cares? Yeah. So I thought I would just start something about other people's
Lean into
music.
It. Yeah. Lean into the weirdness.
Yeah, exactly. And about other artists' music. Mm-hmm. Who are these artists who are weird. Actually, several of them are English artists, and lean into sort of their popularity. And I thought, well, if I just write about other music that I like, chances are I'll meet other fans. And that is kind of how it worked.
Yeah. Well, I think there's definitely an eccentricity to the British generally, but I think that probably manifests itself in a lot of the music that has been created over the years, especially going back to an era of kind of experimentation like the 60s, 70s, and some of the songs from that era, maybe not the more complicated songs, did actually come into the school assembly hall in the UK. And so I grew up singing songs by artists that may have kind of experimented quite a lot, like Joni Mitchell or Bob Dylan. We actually sang their maybe more popular songs in our school assemblies, which is interesting. So,
do you remember any Joni Mitchell songs you sang?
We sang Both Sides Now.
Really?
In the school assembly,
wow.
Yeah. I looked at Live from Both Sides Now. And I feel like we might have done even Big Yellow Taxi
children
as well.
often do.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, Big Yellow Taxi.
I talk about in my show, my live show, about how some of the themes we sang about are quite random. And I guess you could also argue quite left wing as well. A lot of these songs. I mean, there was a songwriter called Malvina Reynolds, and she wrote some quite simple songs like Magic Penny, but she also wrote tunes which are quite kind of dark and bleak about like nuclear holocaust and stuff like this. Like she had a song which was What Have They Done to the Rain is the name of the song. We would that was,
Acid Rain.
Yeah, about the acid rain and kind of the impending doom of a kind of a nuclear showdown with Russia. And we would be singing songs like this in our school assembly. But I mean, yeah.
Well, in America, we had, at least when I was growing up, and I'm about 10 years older than you, I think. I was in a choir. It was mandatory, and we sang the Bryan Adams song, Everything I Do It For You,
Yeah.
from Robin Hood. And we sang a Bob Seger song, that old time rock and roll.
Okay, nice.
We sang Hello Mutta, Hello Fada. Do you know that one?
Hello, mother. Hello, father.
Yeah, here I am.
I actually only know that song because of The Simpsons.
Oh, well, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we sang, it was interesting. We sang a lot of like strange songs. And I
Okay.
remember the teacher, this was actually one of my formation stories for music, because the teacher would do this. She would be like, hello, mother. Hello, father. You know, this thing.
And if you're watching this on YouTube, you can see what Anthony's doing, which is going up and down with his hand.
Oh, yeah. So, sorry, I'm always a video first creator.
Yeah, for sure.
But, yeah, so she did this whole thing. She moved her hand around. And there's a great Bobby McFerrin TED Talk where he jumps on the stage and he's like...
I've seen that, I think.
Yeah, so it's kind of that where it really helped me to learn intervals. Or at least to visualize them in my head. And I also had a computer. It's actually one of these computers on the ground.
Oh, wow.
From 1984.
You might just be able to see it.
Yeah,
if
Mac
you lean in the right
SE,
way.
there it
we go.
is.
Yeah.
And I wrote music on that. Somewhere in here is the original MIDI interface. Like the first MIDI interface for the Mac. And I used that. And it's handmade, you can tell. But we had a keyboard, a synthesizer, and I hooked it up to the Mac, and we had this app called Deluxe Music Construction Set, and I would just click and put notes all over the place.
Kind of like an early Cubase type thing.
Yeah, but this was like 1985 to 7, so really early, one of the first music apps. And I wrote music, but I didn't understand what I was doing. I just liked packing notes into measures and then seeing what happened. So
And that was the genesis of your exploration into weird music.
For sure, yeah. I remember I actually re-recorded my first song I wrote when I was 5, and it was really hard to play because it didn't follow convention.
Yeah.
But it was interesting.
Yeah. Probably up until your late teens. I think there are a lot fewer constraints on your kind of experimental styles, and some people keep that curiosity of experimentation, and I'm sure you featured a lot of them on your channel. One of them, someone in particular that I think is a great example of that, is Jacob Collier.
Oh yeah,
who
your former bandmate.
Well, he was a bandmate of my bandmate, but yeah, I mean that's my tenuous connection. But yeah, I mean he says that he kind of did a very similar thing. So he had a kind of rudimentary like music software and would just create these incredible things, and then later try and remake them himself with as technology can expanded and evolved. But then I think he's kind of kept that curiosity of experimentation. Did you study music at school? Was there like a music program?
Absolutely,
like a traditional music program.
Sure, yeah. But you had to sign up for it, so it was optional. It was just band, school band. I played alto saxophone. And we rented the instrument, from a local music shop. And I learned how to read sheet music playing saxophone. Even though I wrote sheet music on the computer, I didn't really connect. To me, it was just like a canvas. So I just painted notes on, and I thought, oh, that's kind of cool. And I didn't know what key signatures or time signatures or anything were.
Yeah.
And so reading music... using the old books, this is a G, whatever. I didn't really know about keys either, and I think the sax is in B flat. But yeah, I got into treble clef, knew how to read, and then I took maybe 3 piano lessons with my dad's friend. Right. So I knew very basics about bass clef and treble clef. And then in band.
So what's a music education looking like in the States? I mean, if you're in just a kind of your average high school, maybe it's because there's different terms in the UK with public schools. So in America, a public school is just the general something for everyone, right?
Right.
But slightly counterintuitively, in the UK, a public school is a school you got to pay to go to.
Oh,
I think. Yeah,
interesting.
So,
okay.
So we've got public and private. I'm not actually quite sure what the exact difference is between a public and private school in the UK. If you know, feel free to write in. And my email is notesfromschoolpodcast@gmail.com. I'll probably look it up after this anyway. But so yeah, how does a public school kind of? You went to a public school,
Yeah. Right. So. we didn't have a lot of money growing up. Like I said, we rented the saxophone. It wasn't a great saxophone or anything. But I played sax. It was a room full of other, kids learning instruments. And, our kids, I think most kids go through some music. Every child goes through some music in general in the U.S. Although today there's more variety in education than ever, especially with Arizona is one of the more progressive states around something called school choice.
Right.
So you can go to like any school you want and your tax dollars are moved to that school. But when I was a kid, there was not selection. So basically music was just part of standard curriculum. You had to play an instrument. You had to, there's a local music store called Milano's. Them and Brindley's Music are like two of the go-to shops for renting instruments because you have to rent an instrument or buy an instrument. And it's all the standard, school band stuff, clarinet, trumpet. There are some drums, but it's usually just percussion like cymbals or mallets or whatever. But everyone generally learns how to read music at least a little bit. Even in my daughter's school, which is a charter school, which is technically like a private public school.
Right.
They have like recorders and not just the standard, alto or soprano. They have like 4 or 5 different types of recorders. Everyone learns how to read music. They all actually, in the previous year, they use a bell system. So it's, everyone has notes on the bells and they hold a bell each. And so they stagger all the kids with these bells and they do the whole.
Oh, cool.
So the next year they do recorder. And then if they want to continue progressing, they can pick up an instrument.
Have you kind of spoken to your kids much about their experience of music in schools, and have you thought about how that compared to your own experience at school?
No, we saw, my wife and I are both musicians, and we saw music, and still do see music as essential as math or science or anything. And it's funny, we basically said we will only force our kids to do one thing. That would be take piano lessons. So they took piano lessons for years, starting at age 4 or 5, something like that.
Do they still play?
Oh my goodness. My oldest is a shredder. He's
really
unbelievable.
Wow. Nice.
I put up a video. Do you know the song 1,000 Miles?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Vanessa Carlton.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'll send you this video.
Okay.
You won't believe it. It's not, he's playing this like jazz prog version of it from
I wonder where he got that inspired from.
Well, I told him about it and he's playing with his friend on the drums. The friend is a virtuoso drummer. So the two of them, it was just written about in I can't remember which magazine, Good magazine.
Okay.
But the two of them are playing. You will not believe it. Like they're two 17-year-olds playing.
Maybe I'll put the link to it. It's on publicly available.
It's on Make Weird Music.
It's on a certain YouTube channel called Make Weird Music.
But we forced them. And I have known so many adults who said, I wish my parents forced me to do something. But we agreed long ago, me and my wife, we are going to force our kids to take piano lessons because it's just as essential. It's part of their, place in the world. It's a language. And so we said, you have to learn music. You have to learn piano. Of all the instruments, piano is probably the most general, and they can adapt it to anything else that they learn. But piano is where we started, and they took lessons for years. They hated it in the beginning, and then they ended up loving it.
I think that's kind of the general story for a lot of people that play the piano, isn't it?
Right.
Just kind of got to push through it if you can.
Yeah, and it becomes something you're good at. It's like weightlifting or anything else. You know, you have to develop a muscle for it. And I just think we learn 5 times 5. Why don't we learn treble clef? 4/4. Like it's to me, they're basically the same thing.
It's really interesting the pushback against like music lessons for everybody, because I think there's a kind of an idea it's like, well, it's not really that applicable to the real world, whatever the real world might be for you. But I think there is also a massive argument to be made for learning for the sake of learning, and also learning a specific skill that is so applicable to so many other things. So if you're playing the piano, people quite often ask me, if you could give someone advice about learning one instrument, what would it be? And I also say the same thing, piano. So I was interested to hear your reasoning behind that. But it's a full body experience, isn't
Yes.
it? I mean, you're using pretty much every part of your body.
Yeah.
Your feet, your hands, your brain,
Yes.
your eyes, like your ears, obviously.
Your posture,
Your posture,
back,
yeah.
your
I mean,
breathing,
my posture
your
right
lungs.
now is not so good. But...
Well, I just think the guitar is the better instrument. I think the guitar is the best, most diverse instrument, period.
Right.
But the piano is the most essential. And if you learn piano, it's a foundation that will help you for the rest of your life. But, I mean, I have so much to say about this.
Yeah.
First of all, it's the only universal language, music. It doesn't matter if you're Jew, Muslim, Catholic, anything. In fact, I love that in Gaza there are these musicians who get together, Palestinian and Israeli musicians that get together and they perform where buildings are destroyed, and they have these like small orchestras and they play in these like pits where bombs have exploded. Yeah. And it's like, it doesn't matter. It's a human thing.
It's like the First World War, the British and Germans on Christmas Day. They stopped fighting, they played football, and they sang carols together.
Exactly, yeah. So I think music it unites everyone as humans. And so that's the first thing I think about when I want my kids to learn music. Because if I don't speak Spanish, but I go to Spain and they have a guitar, I can speak Spanish, and we don't need to even have sheet music. If we have our ears, just like this, we're just riffing. My kids theoretically could improvise through something musical and just play with other people, even if they don't speak the same language. Secondly, there's the value of practice, and I've written extensively about practice, videos and books, but practice. I'm a big believer in Vince Lombardi's quote, practice doesn't make perfect, perfect practice makes perfect. Yeah. And so teaching my kids about practice as they learn harder, progressively harder songs, doesn't mean like crazy time signatures, although that's what Gabe does, but more complex chords, more complex rhythms, more complex melodies. These things teach them that they have to strive and work towards something. You learn math, but then you don't need to know what a logarithm is. You don't need to learn or remember what sine, cosine, any of that stuff. But it's helpful to learn. With music, you're always building on top of. And so to me, it is an iteratively incremental growth that is hard work, but not so hard. It's like you don't, it's like, if you have a shovel and you have to dig a hole, you can get really good at digging a hole, but there's a limit, there's not a limit with music. And so I just think there's so much about music. It's actually, people don't think about this, but it is one of our oldest forms of data storage. Like, it's a transmission of information. Right. Yeah. Sheet music is a hard drive. And so if you look at sheet music written 400 years ago, you don't know what language they spoke, but the data is there. The ones and zeros of the music are there, and you can play exactly what Chopin played. Yeah. So we have recordings of Rachmaninoff actually playing, but like nobody thinks about that. It's like Rachmaninoff is in the sheet music. You can listen to him on YouTube, but the sheet music is right there. Everything he played is right there. So we have this data storage mechanism. And it perpetuates what was the humanity beliefs, like early music, 12th century English music, for example. There's all these instruments, like they had early notation, and then monks, across Europe had their own notation, the 4-line staff. So to me, there's just like, it's a transmissive, or is that a word? Transmissive? Transmissive technology that keeps humanity going. And it's an exploration of the human spirit. So there's just like, there's so much to it, more than just like 1-4-5, hot cross buns. Those things are like learning your ABCs. Once you learn how to write sentences musically, you have a form of communication and perpetuation of information, not just data, but like who you are. You don't like, you can write a book and that disappears. Sheet music, of course, can disappear. But in 1,000 years, if someone finds your sheet music, chances are they'll be able to play it. They may not even know what language you were writing in, but the sheet music is probably going to be around longer than words. So I just think it's such an incredible human technology, and it's, to me, as important, if not more important, than the words we use.
Yeah. And it's interesting talking about technology and music, and the piano, the stand-up piano, the upright piano was an early form of mass technology, wasn't
Right.
it? Every kind of household that wanted to have some kind of standing would get a piano like we might get a computer or a TV
Right.
throughout the decades.
That's right.
And that was a way also of bringing community together. I also really loved your point about kind of reaching through time and connecting with people. And we don't know how Mozart would have actually physically played the music.
Right.
I mean, performance styles and trends change over decades
Right.
and centuries,
Right.
but the notes that he played because they're there for us to read, and we can reach that hand through history in a way that you can't really do for anything else. I mean, with literature, it's similar, but you're not physically engaging with the literature.
Right. You can read a poem.
Yeah.
You can recite a poem.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you cannot perform a poem.
Yeah.
If you perform a poem, it's music.
Yeah.
That's like, it's a lyric, right? To music. Music is to me like the core language for humanity. It's one of the only things that conveys emotion as part of its metadata. And so like, I can listen to a Bach piece and I transcribed the entire Piano Partita No. 1 by Bach for a 9-string electric guitar and a 6-string guitar.
Is there a video that people can check out?
Yeah, there's some video of that.
Yeah.
But I notated all of that, and like, you do this, you can explore the music and look at the chord sequences and understand an emotion. And it's like, when I play this, I can connect with J.S. Bach.
Yeah.
Like, in a literal way, I am playing the notes he played. It's not like I'm reading the words although that's great. It's great. G.K. Chesterton, one of my favorite authors, I can read his words and I can practically hear him saying it. And that's a wonderful thing. But with music, I'm not bound to only knowing English or reading a translation of, Bach's German or whatever he spoke. I don't really know. Into modern day English, but I can look at the music and look at the notation and everything's the same. And I can just take his source data, go to his GitHub, download his data. And if I want to fork it and make my own arrangement, I can do that. Like, music offers that total.
What's your relationship with improvisation? Because talking of Bach, a lot of his music was just from his improvisation as an organist, So he would just sit down for hours on end and improvise while there was a church service or whatever that was lasting 3 hours long, and then he might go away and write down some of what he wrote, but a lot of it, I'm sure the vast majority of his music would have been lost into the ether, lost to time.
Sure.
So what's your kind of, first of all, relationship with improvisation and performance, and how do you think the two kind of combine into week?
I've been improvising all week. I took a song that I wrote when I was 16 and I'm sort of reinventing it and I'm re-recording it. And when I was 16, I was young and dumb and I only wanted to play fast, challenging stuff. Well, I'm 43 now, and the thing, like, this song is so fast and challenging. And so I'm like, okay, I remember doing that.
Cursing your younger self.
Yeah, a little bit, but it's also like, well, there's music in here. So how can I take what young, immature me did 27 years ago and turn it into something that I want to express today? And so I loop chord sequences. I recorded some rough structure of this song, and I have some of the chords playing, and then it's like, oh, I can put these sort of pieces on top of these chords. And for me, it's just a wonderful, it's the best form of practice. It's so redeeming because you feel like you're communicating with yourself. I'm one of there's like 15% of people who don't have an inner monologue.
Okay.
I'm one of those people, right? Yeah. And so a sentence, I can only think when somebody says, well, what words, like, what do you think? If I try thinking about a sentence, I get like 4 or 5 words, and then it just kind of like disappears. Like, it's like captions on a TikTok video. Like, you see a few words and then they're gone. That's kind of how it is in my head. Most things are visual or musical. And so with improvisation, I can play and just sort of discover thoughts. And I love this musician named Trey Gunn from King Crimson. He said, musicians are like mathematicians. We don't actually invent anything. We discover it. We put a shovel in the ground, we start digging around, and we stumble upon things. Yeah. All of the notes, the permutations of every note, every combination of notes, it's all there. Mathematically, it's like the numbers are there, the equations are there. It's kind of up to you to just discover the ones that resonate with you. So to me, improvisation is like, oh, that's fun to play, or that expresses this. It's like inarticulable emotion that you have associated with a string of notes, sequence of notes, and it's like, wow, that just the technique. I played that note, and it was pure, Sure. And so you discover these things about yourself and the music you like and things you don't like, things that surprise you about your improvisation. All of that comes out, and I find improvisation is the best practice. I can get 60 to 90 minutes on just improvisation, and it's sometimes, I know it sounds really like lame or maybe even pretentious, but I've made myself cry, right. Just recently playing something. I actually shared this with Robert Fripp on Facebook, and he added to my whole experience, because I mentioned that I was practicing, and for one of the first times in my life, like, tears were coming down my cheeks, and it was the simplest thing, but it just so resonated with me that night. You cannot get that looking at sheet music. Yeah. You cannot find that. I love sheet music. I love playing composed, through composed music. It's wonderful, and it's safe, and that's cool. But yeah, like, I don't want to get on stage and sort of explore that part of myself. I'm not that kind of improviser, but when I am writing music, I love the whole act of it.
I find it really interesting what you just said about improvisation. And as a teacher, it's not really encouraged for my pupils to go off the beaten track. And you've got to stick to a syllabus, you've got to stick to a curriculum, a certain set of songs or exercises that my pupils have to do in order to pass their grades to a certain mark, and then they'll come away with a certificate, and that's great. Right. But that's hard, because then I think, well, I'm getting them to pass their exams, right? So they're ticking that box, and I'm sure their parents are quite happy, and they can use it to put on their school CVs when they're moving on to the secondary schools or whatever. But they're not necessarily engaging with that improvisational element, which is so exciting. And as you say, we've only got a certain number, without getting into like the microtones and all that kind of stuff, but we've only got a certain number of notes that we can play on a piano if you're following the kind of the Western,
the 12 EDO equal divisions of the octave.
There's only so much you can. There are only many notes, but anyway, we could do a whole 2-hour podcast on improvisation, I think.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I think fascinating.
The most important element gets to what J.S. Bach was doing, which is communicating with God, like praising God. Now, whatever you believe in, whether it's a Christian God or the universe in the woo-woo sense or something, you connect with an act of creation in a way that is so universal and is not really possible through other mechanisms. And so I think, like, improvisation, when you uncover something, it's like, oh my goodness, like where Trey Gunn said, you're kind of digging through the dirt and then you stumble on something. For me, it's, yes, I agree with that from a compositional perspective, but from an improvisational perspective, you are participating in the act of creation in a way that is expressive, time-based, like all these other, like, you're using frequencies. There's just so much to it that feels like I am connecting with a greater thing, something beyond myself. And yes, sometimes you can get that playing other people's music or through composed music, but improvisation, it feels like a participatory act where Robert Fripp would call it the muse, like when the muse strikes and music with a capital M enters the room, it's what you live for.
Yeah.
And so as a musician, you can only understand that when it happens to you. And it is such a rare privilege when it does. And it can be something as simple as da da da, like if you're just feeling it that night in sitting alone improvising or even playing in front of a crowd, you wait for that moment your whole life. And every time you get to experience it, it's like the act of creation is happening within you in a way that's just so much bigger than I played well tonight. It's like, oh, music was there with us. That's incredible.
It's funny how that mindset is so ingrained in other cultures, but are not necessarily Western cultures.
Yeah.
So think about Indian music,
right?
Or I don't know, kind of like African drumming or something. It's all about the improvisation, call and response, and kind of interacting not just with yourself, but if you're in an ensemble, interacting with other people and the fascinating connections you can get with other people from that improvisation. I wonder if I know this is just kind of a hypothetical question, but I wonder if there is a way that we can get that kind of the weirdness and creativity of improvisation into a classroom. I don't know.
Well, to me, the word weird means you're taking a creative risk.
Yeah.
That's really all it is. And so a lot of people think weird, like there's a band called The Residents that I've featured on the channel. They wear eyeball masks with top hats and tuxedos, and it's like, yeah, that's weird.
I might wear that for my next show.
That is, weird from a colloquial standpoint. But from a musical standpoint, sometimes, Bach does things that you're like, oh, that's weird. Like what there's, I think it's in Lute Suite 996. There, I was learning, I think it was the, it wasn't the fugue. It was a faster, like a adagio or something like that. And I was playing it at like half tempo just to learn it.
Sure.
And it was so incredibly beautiful. And then you listen at full speed and it's like you miss all of this beauty that's happening, unfolding right under.
All the inner voices.
Exactly. So when you play it slow, it's like, that can't be right. Those notes sound totally wrong. Even that to me is like, yeah, he's building a little bridge. Like he's using his creativity to go from section A, motif A to motif B. But to me, like that's, you could say his use of tritones was weird. But in today's standards, there's so much safe music that to go out on a limb as a form of personal creative expression is weird.
Yeah.
And so you can listen to lots of music and never encounter a weird moment. But when there are musicians who take creative risks, they almost certainly do something unorthodox, unexpected, even in very orthodox and expected genres. You'll come across like Radiohead. If you listen to like Kid A was, I don't know how old you were when that came out, maybe 12.
Yeah, about that, I think. Yeah.
I was in college and it came out and I bought it. I was like, what is this?
Especially coming off the back of the
OK Computer. Right?
Yeah.
So you expect another OK Computer and it's like, holy cow, that is completely out there. But when you pick apart some of the songs, they're not that strange, but the packaging and the presentation of all of it is very strange. And so to me, like weird can be anything, like XTC, another British band. Some of their music is like very poppy, but then when you look at the chords and the way that they're constructing this music, it's very weird.
Andy Partridge?
Andy Partridge.
Partridge.
There's a band called Family from the 1960s and 70s. Roger Chapman, known as Chapo, out in the UK. So they have an album called Music in a Doll's House. And it's very much like, when you first hear it, it's very like old Led Zeppelin, old Joe Cocker kind of blues rock kind of stuff. But if you actually play the chords, they're using like chromatic major chords, and it's like, what is happening here? So these are weird things. They just kind of defy some form of convention, and the artist is taking some form of creative risk and straying from the, quote unquote rules of Western composition.
And you're championing that with your YouTube channel.
Yeah.
Or YouTube, as we're in America.
Yes, exactly. And I just say the more followers we have, the brighter the spotlight we can shine on artists. Mm-hmm. As someone who does a channel that features other people's music primarily, there's not millions of dollars to be made because every video has a copyright, demonetization.
Yeah.
And so unless I'm doing all original stuff, I'm going to be demonetized, which I am left and right. So I make like $300, $400, $500 a month. Sometimes I'll make $1,000 to $3,000 a month if I have a really, banging video that's just taken off. Otherwise, it's mostly $3 a month memberships, people supporting the channel. That's where the bulk of the revenue comes from.
So if someone was, let's say, hypothetically listening to this and was thinking of setting up, it doesn't obviously need to be to do with music, but if you've got your own niche interest, whatever it might be, whether it's school assembly songs or whatever it is, what would your advice be as as a content creator yourself, someone who's started this movement of celebrating weirdness in music? I mean, if someone loved, renovating doors or something, whatever it might be, what would your advice be for someone to get into?
Oh my goodness, just let people into your obsession. There are so many channels that are unexpectedly popular. Videos where people are just carving pieces of wood. I mean, you would just think it's the most boring thing in the world. There's guys who repair watches, and they do really zoomed in cameras on,
And there's an audience.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Millions of subscribers on these channels. Anything today can fly, anything can work.
Do you think TikTok in particular has opened the door to that? Or
no,
do you think YouTube?
No, YouTube.
Yeah.
TikTok is, to me, the McDonald's of video online. Yeah. It's great sometimes.
Do you use it as a consumer?
A little bit.
Yeah.
Mostly not. There are a few creators on there I really love, and so I just go to TikTok to watch their stuff. But for the most part, YouTube is much more of a level playing field and a creator paradise. It's a meritocracy in a sense. I don't think meritocracies really exist in general, but some places are more meritocratic than others. And TikTok is not meritocratic.
What do you mean when you say you don't think meritocracy
Good content wins on YouTube.
Yeah.
If your content's great, the algorithm will make it, you'll put it in front of people.
And that works differently to the algorithms on other sites like TikTok. Because there's kind of the clickbaity style of hook someone in the first 0.1 seconds.
Yeah.
And, you might get, the algorithm might pick it up. But
right, well, that's why they pay so much less.
Yeah.
Your TikTok is huge, but
I don't get paid. I mean, it's like
it doesn't
whatever.
pay you anything, right?
It's very, very little.
For my YouTube channel, if I truly spent time monetizing 40,000 subscribers, I could probably make a living on it right now. It's just not my goal for my life.
And it's kind of the new Google, really, isn't it? YouTube is kind of, people just use it as a search engine instead of.
Well, there's that, and it is. I mean, it's so many things. It's a college, you can learn anything on YouTube. I remodeled my entire kitchen learning on YouTube how to assemble cabinets, how to keep them level and how to fix concrete. I have a British race car in my, garage, which you saw in my garage. And I've just learned over and over from YouTube, like, how do you replace gaskets on a carburetor? How do you fix or replace brake master cylinder? Like all of these things, I can just go on YouTube and learn anything. It is the most incredible source of knowledge because it's humans showing each other other things. TikTok is like, I'm here to entertain and I'm giving you a quick hit of sugar, like a McDonald's burger. I ate one recently. It was so sweet. I was like, wow, there's like sugar in this or something.
I wonder how an American McDonald's burger compares to European.
Yeah,
McDonald's
I don't really
burger.
know. But to me, YouTube is like, no, you've got like the better the ingredients you have, the more likely you are to get eyeballs in front of your content. Whereas TikTok's like, we're going to give you that dopamine, straight into your veins. Two totally different missions, and that's why Shorts operates completely different than long form. But I think YouTube, you have to be decent at video, at audio, at writing, at marketing, packaging, presentation. You have to be effective on the camera. There's just so much that you have to do well. And when you do it well, anything is possible.
It kind of unlocks a new world. And I've had to set a 15-minute lock on my TikTok. And I've had that on for quite a long time.
I don't know what
now.
that means.
So if I'm
screen
on,
time limit.
Yeah, screen time limit. Yeah. So if I'm on for too long, I try not to completely do this, but I've started to get to a point where I'm slightly burnt out with social media. So I do post and ghost a little bit now.
Oh yeah.
So I get it out there, and then in the past I'll be like, all right, who's commented? Let's reply to some comments. Let's engage with the people on there. And I think that is definitely important to a certain extent, but you can just get sucked into the rabbit hole, and all your time's just spent,
And the more popular you get, the greater a time suck it becomes. So that's why I have paying members. I interact with them.
Yeah.
I'll interact with as many people as I can, but now I have a group of people who prioritize their dollars to go to me and my time to go to them. So, there are ways of managing all this. I just think YouTube or content creation is really about relationship building, and it's not about money. The money comes. I never expected to make $1. I still don't expect to make any money. I don't know, I know why people pay, but I'm shocked every month. I'm like, people are paying me to just make a video out of nothing. It's like this magic box. I do something for a couple of hours, I put it online, and then suddenly money shows up.
Yeah.
It's like this incredible black box that I get to do what I want and then magically get paid. And so I think I have more of an altruistic, mission with it. But if you were truly serious about building a business around it, you could definitely do that, which is funny to say because I've met so many YouTubers. I've been going to these YouTube events, kind of exclusive events.
I've not been invited yet, but
well, you got to be a big shot.
Yeah, exactly.
But I can't tell you how many of them have no idea that they're running a business. They have no clue.
They just put something online and then money turns up in their account.
Yeah, and then they're like, how do you have insurance? I'm like, you don't have insurance?
Yeah.
You're making $30,000 a month and you don't have health insurance.
Okay.
So it's like, these kinds of things are like...
Is it because they're just all 18 or something?
No, they just don't understand. Because it's magic, I film something, I drag the file, I, put a title and a thumbnail and description together, and money shows up. You don't need skills beyond what we discussed. But when it comes to taxes, the government's like, you're making a lot of money from this.
Yeah.
And that's not okay to just have no idea what you're doing, because you can get in real legal trouble. So I think just content creators need to realize there's no more opportunistic time to be alive, for sure. And you can make any kind of content on YouTube successful. You could sew, little snowflakes or something, whatever you wanted to do. Someone who finishes drums, screws things into wood. Any of that content can succeed. But you have to also realize, you are making something for other people to consume. And if you package it well, just like with music, if it's packaged well and you promote it in the right ways, your audience will be there for it.
And it's really interesting because I think that's kind of like a mindset shift, and just preparing yourself for the risks that might come with creativity and putting yourself out there. And I was actually quite inspired by a book you wrote, which is the Clueless at the Work book. And you've written other books, particularly you've got the Failure Thrasher book, and you can check it out on your website. But the Clueless at the Work book kind of changed my mindset, and I think it's quite like, as this is kind of like a UK versus USA episode, we really is stereotypical, but have very different mindsets as to creation but also particularly self-confidence.
Yeah.
And that for me really shifted my mindset to go from a place where I was thinking, well, I've got all these ideas of what I could do. I don't really have, I've got a bit of an online presence, but not really. I haven't put myself out there. And I think we were talking before this podcast about, was it the tall poppy syndrome?
Yeah.
And like the tallest poppy will get, cut down. And I think that's definitely a mindset that is kind of a shame, but it's so ingrained in the British psyche of, don't big yourself up too much.
Right.
And we were even talking about Timothée Chalamet, who just won an Oscar for his Bob Dylan movie. And he went up to take his acceptance speech and he said, do you know what? I worked for 5 years for this movie. I wanted it to be as great as I could possibly make it. And I want to be one of the greats. And that is such an interesting mindset that if you said that in England, you'd be kind of... Exactly. You'd get eggs thrown at you and all sorts of stuff. Or just kind of like... Or just, subtly tutted or eye rolled or thinking, oh, who does he think he is? But then eventually people will come around and start gravitating to you. And I think when I started posting stuff online, I was very much like, oh, I'm just going to post what I think might be, first of all, genuinely useful for my students at first. It came out of the lockdown, and then I kind of stuck to my guns a little bit. And even though the whole concept of singing songs that we sang at school is kind of a universal experience in the UK, it is still quite a weird thing to do, really. And people say to me, "How did you come up with this idea of doing these songs?" And it is odd, but just gotta stick to.
There's so much to say about that. I mean, first of all, the idea that it's an idea is you didn't come up with an idea.
No.
You just were expressing yourself creatively and educationally, and it was something that you felt would be helpful to the world. You didn't say, well, I'm going to make this channel that in a few years will end up like this and I'll be able to perform
there. It definitely wasn't a 5-year plan.
No, of course, because it's rarely how success works, outside of America, at least.
Yeah, for sure.
But also, there's so much security that the Brits and Europeans have. There's no social safety net in America. And so in England, there were and still are monarchs, and there is a caste system. Right. There are classes. Oh, he's part of the aristocracy, oh, he's royalty, he's a duke, he's a lord, he's this and she's that and whatever. We're just, peons or whatever. We're just citizens, right? In America, the idea is anyone can succeed if they try hard enough, right? Yeah. Europe is very different. And so in Europe, you'll never starve to death. In America, you will starve to death. It's like going out into the cold of Antarctica without a jacket, And the government, nobody is going to be there to be like, hey, buddy, here's a jacket, If you go to England, you can go to NHS. Sure. You got a health emergency. It's not you don't have to sell your house because you had a health emergency. In the US, you have to sell your house if you have a health emergency. You have to file bankruptcy. It's such a different, messed up way of living here. But it's like we've learned how to use this dysfunction for the greater good. And I think everyone has mental stuff. I'm writing that book, Mental Prisons. Yeah. But I think everyone has a way of turning their disadvantages and their dysfunction into something positive if the will is there. And so for me, the whole idea of Brits kind of, oh, don't talk about yourself. Don't try to become popular. I don't want to become popular. Yeah. I don't even like talking about myself. But in America, it's like, if I don't do this, my family might lose their home. Yeah. In the UK, it's like, well, if I don't do this, well, I probably won't face any public shaming.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It is just like there's so much more at stake, and that's so messed up to say that like the government will just let you starve. There are programs and there's shelters and whatever, but there's just such there's so much insecurity fueling our capitalistic desires that people are like, I want to be a content creator and whatever, and they're thinking about this because there's so much pressure on, well, if you don't figure out what you're going to do with your life, you're going to starve and die or live with your parents till you're 35 or whatever.
I feel quite lucky because I'm married to an American, and I feel like in the time that we've been together, I've slowly started to get some of her mindset of celebrate your wins.
Yeah.
Which is great. And so I think, in the past I'd be like, I'd say, I've just, I went for a job interview. I probably won't get it, but right. I actually did get it, and it's, the best school in the UK kind of thing. But whatever, it's
right,
nothing really.
Yeah.
But then I think now being around that kind of American mindset a little bit more has kind of, freed me up so much. I feel like the baggage of self-deprecation is slowly. I mean, it's I don't think it will ever go. Really,
well, shame is like a part of the UK DNA.
Well, yeah, probably for good reason. Sometimes.
Yeah, it's good. Americans are shameless, so it's like the other end of the spectrum. So I just think America is such a circus sometimes.
Okay.
You being somewhere in the middle, it makes it a lot harder to succeed, but it's probably the right thing, from a human perspective. If we believe that, let's say, God created us, we are products of creation, even your parents, okay, leave God out of it. Your parents create you, and the idea that you would just end up being a homeless slob is not what they want. They don't want to raise a slob who does nothing with his life. They want to raise a kid who has aspirations and ends up with a better life than their own, right? And so in the UK, it's just funny how it's like, yes, of course, we love our children and we want our children to thrive and we want great things for them, but not that great.
Yeah.
But in the US, there's a different dysfunction about it. Where there can be jealous parents or parents who enable the wrong kinds of things. You don't have the beauty pageant parents like we do here.
Not as much. No.
Yeah. So there's just there's always going to be dysfunction where there are humans because we're just fallen beings. But I just think in America, there's a bias towards action, a bias towards self-promotion. There's more shamelessness. And I think it's just there's so much more at stake. You don't have insurance unless you have a job, which is one crazy thing. And we'll spend more to defend our borders, or whatever, than to keep our people alive.
Right. Yeah.
And so it's just a very well-known fact, if I lose my house, I lose my house, and then I lose everything. I start losing my teeth. I lose, whatever. And it's just so different here,
I think there's a quite interesting way to bring it full circle in a way, because I think in terms of the British mindset, there's a self-deprecating negative side of it, but there's also kind of a funny side to the self-deprecation. I know that you're kind of a fan of not just British musicians, but British humor and comedy, Monty Python and IT Crowd or whatever it is. There's a lot of great British humor, and that kind of comes out of self-deprecation sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely.
But playing on it in a funny way. I don't know if do you have any favorites aside from?
Oh my goodness, I love England and so much of the art that has come out of England. I love Matt Berry. Pretty much anything he's in. Yeah. Snuffbox has some of the funniest stuff I've ever seen. He does this guitar lesson. He's got some 13-inch finger or something, and he's playing X chords, and Matt Berry is completely insane.
Yeah.
I've always loved Monty Python. Graham Linehan is great. Alan Partridge, pretty much anything with Steve
Coogan.
Yeah, Steve Coogan. I was thinking Carell.
Yeah.
Steve Coogan's excellent, and Rob Brydon.
Were you a fan of The Office, the British Office?
Yes, I loved it. I love Ricky Gervais. His Afterlife series is excellent. I love Rowan Atkinson. Blackadder was foundational for me. Yeah, Blackadder is just incredible. Lord Flashheart,
Flashy.
right. I love oh geez, he played House. Why can't I think of
Hugh Laurie.
Hugh Laurie,
He's incredible as well.
Oh, he's incredible.
Yeah.
And my kids are watching the show House.
Mm-hmm.
You know, watching him with that American accent, I still can't believe.
Did you watch The Night Manager?
No.
He's so good in it. It's him and Tom Hiddleston. And it's definitely watch it if you can. I think it's just a 4-part episode, a 4-part season. And he plays this kind of really beguiling kind of supervillain, but who's very kind of nonchalant
Likeable?
about it.
Oh, okay.
He's quite likable,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Tom Hiddleston is he's literally a night manager who turns up being a bit of a spy kind of thing.
That's
so it's
great.
It's really great.
I love so much British culture. I mean, Gentle Giant, and King Crimson, just Jethro Tull. There's so many British bands. And King Crimson's really interesting because kind of their peak period was the 1980s, and it was 2 Brits and 2 Americans, and the music that they made together it cracked to the earth, you know.
And another amazing example of that is Fleetwood Mac,
yes,
which is a British band. We've got a couple of Californians in, changed the whole scene.
Absolutely, absolutely
changed everything.
You know, Gentle Giant for me, they've played like music that's inspired by centuries of British music, English music, early music, and so there's this whole genre of Canterbury music.
Okay.
Peter Gabriel, huge inspiration for me. I could go on and on about British music, British musicians, British movies, TV shows,
but not Marmite.
Not Marmite. Oh my goodness.
British food. What's your kind of favorite and least favorite British foods?
It's so funny. There are these threads on X about that, and British breakfasts are just so disgusting.
Oh, no.
But Devonshire cream. I mean, we went to the Lake District and went to this like Ashley Manor Hotel or something. Laura Ashley Hotel.
Okay,
I don't remember.
Yeah,
it was some of the greatest food I've ever had.
Nice.
But also, you know, I've had some of the just least appetizing food.
Sausage rolls.
Blood pies,
blood pudding,
blood pudding. Yeah, I love a lot of, you know, British food. I love the culture. I would absolutely move there. I have so many friends. It's just there's so many great things about it. But also, I'm an American. You know, I love driving 20 hours and seeing all new parts of the country. I know you can do that sort of.
Well, if you drove south 20 hours or southwest, southeast from London, you probably get to, I don't know, like the outskirts of Turkey.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
The U.S. is so big. It's such an incredible country in many, many ways.
Yeah.
Yes, we have real problems, but I'm not somebody who thinks it's the greatest country on earth. Of course, I'm proud of my country. I think most people should be proud of where they're from.
Yeah, for sure.
I love America. Every time I travel, and I've been to a bunch of places in South America, Central America, across Europe. I always am excited to go home, and I can't wait to get home sometimes. So in America, like, there's just so many things that you can do where people are like, what? You can just build stuff? You know, you could just go and build in the middle of the desert? Like, yeah, you can. You know, there's just certain kinds of freedoms that we get used to that when you go to other places, it's just like, oh yeah, you can't do that.
I think it's nice that you can take things from other cultures where you've been, or other mindsets from Europe or wherever you've been, and then apply it to your own experience. And I feel like I had it almost the opposite way after I kind of read your book and I was spending a bit more time in the States. And this was end of 2021 or two? No, end of 2022. And then I was feeling a little homesick for England. I was thinking about my upbringing, and then I'd already been putting out these videos about the school assembly songs. And then from being here and unlocking a sense of, oh, do you know what? Just go for it and let's give everything a go. And, you know, who cares what people think, and believing in yourself a little bit more. I then wrote almost a show that kind of was my love for my country in a weird way. Like all the experience I had as a British person, and what a weird, eccentric, crazy place it is. Yeah. But kind of getting those and celebrating that weirdness and that eccentricity.
No one would have guessed that you would end up doing what you're doing.
No.
And I think it's...
Do you find it weird?
A little bit.
Perspective.
I mean, when I watch some of your videos, I'm like, how does this work? I love you very much, you know this, but sometimes I see your videos, I'm like, that is so cringe.
Exactly.
Some of these songs and just like, you're almost like a TV show host, in the 1960s or something.
Yeah.
I know in England that has a totally different vibe.
It does help when people have had a few drinks as well. But help.
In America, sometimes you'll see things on British TV like Antiques Roadshow.
Yeah.
And you're like, where did that hair come from? Where are these people from? And I'm sure they do the same. In America, it's absolutely the same. Looking the other way.
Yeah.
What you do is very strange, musically not weird. I don't think you're taking creative risk in that sense, but I think what you do is incredible, and I think you found this moment of genius for yourself where
I'll put that on my poster.
Yeah, I really do. Yeah. I think it's brilliant, like actually brilliant not just like amazing, but a level of genius. You've tapped into something that is so foundational to British people, and I think it's fantastic. So, Make Weird Music exists to please very few people. Obviously it's anti-mainstream, and so I'm bound to certain limits. I can't play certain music. I love so much other music that I would never put on the channel.
But it shines a light on a place where not many other people have shone it, and it kind of opens up discovery and creativity, which is a universal thing, even though it's kind of a niche interest.
Yes.
I mean, the kind of the themes are universal.
Right, but what you're doing is like, you are bringing people back to an experience that they've had that's shared as part of your culture. And I think that's a very unifying, wonderful thing from the human perspective, from the British perspective, creatively. There's just so many things that you're doing that astound me, and I think it's amazing. It's not something I could ever do. And I don't think it's something that would work in America in general, because every state is like its own UK, but the fact that you found something that works so well, and just you're a natural at it, it's incredible. The fact that like your Glastonbury footage, I'm like, here's a guy singing the equivalent of nursery rhymes at the biggest music festival in the world, and there's thousands of people having a blast like that. I guess
literally in the corner of a theatre field as well, somewhere really unassuming.
Yeah, it's incredible. So you're doing something that's just so unexpected and amazing. But in the US, it would be like, that's kind of niche, bonkers, what this guy's doing. You could, like, there's commercials in New York when I was a kid that had music that has like been an earworm my whole life. But if I go to California and sing some of the songs, they have no idea what those are.
It's not as universal an experience in the US.
Absolutely not.
Someone did say, would you ever try and take the show internationally? And I said, well, as this show, it wouldn't really work anywhere else unless I went to maybe Australia,
right,
where there's a bit more of a British kind of link, or possibly just other places where Brits have moved to. But if I came to the States, I would have to frame it as something like the Great British Sing-Along or something like that, or like just lean on that and wear tweed jackets and whatever. I don't know
exactly. And you could have like the sing-along songs with the little bouncing ball and the lyrics. The
in the episode previous to this one, I talked to a guy called Tom Carradine, and I'll send you the episode. It's really interesting, and because he has a sing-along show, which is a Cockney sing-along, and so he goes around singing these songs, which were kind of like either wartime songs or songs that were kind of sung by the Cockneys, which is a very small number of people, really. But it kind of that interest has gone across the UK.
We have that with like Sound of Music.
Okay,
I've been to Sound of Music sing-alongs. And we have it with. The Rocky Horror Picture Show was a huge example of that, and now they're comparing the new Minecraft movie to that experience.
Oh, really? Okay.
Oh my goodness! People go there dressed up. They're throwing food. Popcorn,
I have seen that. I have seen that. Yeah,
it's wild. And I think there's just like every once in a while you come across something that really riles people up in that way. Church is probably the only place where you can go and sing with a group of people on a regular basis. And it's funny, we took some friends to our Catholic church, And he said it was like living in a musical. You all knew when to stand, when to sit, kneel. You just knew all the responses. You're singing in English and Latin, and everyone is just like on cue, you know.
Yeah.
And he was like, it made no sense to him. He was like, I feel like I just went to a movie, you know. I didn't understand anything that was going on. You're all praising a piece of bread.
Well, that's what it's like coming to my show. Everyone knows the claps. The claps were never written down by anybody, and it just kind of spread.
Yeah.
Well, we better wrap it up because this has
sorry.
been an amazing chat. We've covered everything from Bach to Monty Python, you know. And thank you so much for talking so openly about your experiences with creativity and improvisation and everything we've chatted about. And if anyone wants to check out any of your stuff, where can they find you online?
Make Weird Music, you just type it in, or my name, Anthony Garone, you can just type that in. If you type my name in, you get the business side of me.
Okay.
If you type in Make Weird Music, you get the musical side.
We didn't get too much into the business side of you today, but so maybe that'll be another time. Next time I'm over in the States.
Cool.
Well, thank you so much for listening to this episode. We didn't have a sing-along in the end. We were going to try and do a bit of a weird music. We might see if we can add it onto the end of the episode. Anyway, thank you so much for listening to this episode of Notes from School, the podcast. Class dismissed.